My name is Kale, and this is based on my real-life experience. I work as a businessman in Morocco and got sent on a business trip to Nigeria on the 26th of January, 2022. I wasn't really interested in traveling again, but I had to, so I packed my bags and made my way to the airport. I landed safely in Nigeria and got escorted to a luxurious hotel room, where I was informed about how safe the hotel was and how I had nothing to worry about. Being uninterested in their banter, all that was on my mind was, get done with the business deal and leave. The next day, I woke up and made my way to the company to get done with the meeting and sign the contract. The whole day went slow as hell, but I was glad that it was finally over. Making my way to my room, which was on the ground floor, I swiped my card onto the lock and walked in, locking the door behind me. I decided to freshen up as I had already had my dinner before making my way back to the room. As soon as I was done, I packed my stuff for my departure the next day and headed straight to bed by 11 p.m. The clock struck 3 a.m. on the 28th of January. At that hour, I woke up and decided to use the restroom. When I was done, I made my way to the dispenser to get myself some water to drink. As I was about to take a sip, my eyes made contact with the window, the curtains slightly pushed aside. I could see a girl in a gown, around the age of 6, standing next to the tree not too far from my window. She just stood there, staring at me. I sighed and looked at the time, which read 3:10 a.m. I shouted out to her saying, "Hey kid, it's dangerous to be out there alone. Return back to your room." I turned around unbothered, but the atmosphere didn't feel right. I turned to look out the window again, but this time, it was no longer the girl, but a little boy, who stood there, staring right back at me. "What the?" I cursed as I shouted again, while gripping the window pane. "It's too late to be out on pranks, kids. Get back to your rooms." In anger, I turned around to leave, but then I remembered I left the window open, and when I turned to close it, my eyes widened as I released a gasp. The hairs on my skin rose at what I saw. This time, it was a dog. It didn't feel normal to me. All it did was stand in the same spot while staring right into my room. In fear, I slammed the window shut, locked it, and ran back to my bed, covering myself with my blanket, shaking with fear. I tried controlling my breath, but I passed out from fear. I woke up at 8 a.m. in the morning and got dressed as my flight is to take off by 10:30 a.m. As I walked towards the door, I noticed something, which made me remember everything. It all turned out to be a dream, but one thing I couldn't get over was that the door was unlocked and slightly ajar. My heart raced in fear. I checked all my belongings and noticed that nothing was missing. I remember locking my door before heading to bed, but what happened? The security checked all the CCTV cameras, but found nothing. At this point, I wasn't interested in staying at the hotel any longer. I thanked the receptionist, and I left for my flight. I arrived in Morocco safely, and not a day passes that I do not think about what happened in Nigeria. What exactly happened at the luxurious hotel in Abuja?
When I was in high school, there was an abandoned house behind my house. Whenever I passed by there, I would hear the sound of electricity crackling from the house. Although my parents said that nobody had lived there for decades, the sound of electricity kept coming regularly. I was worried that there might be a risk of a fire if the electricity was somehow connected. So, one day, I decided to go into the house with my friend Tim. After we finished school, we went to that house, but hesitated to go in for a while. I asked Tim if he was scared, but he replied, "This is not fear, but rather a trembling of excitement." The old door creaked open with a spine-chilling sound, and we entered inside. Inside the house, there were scattered dog feeds everywhere, and a strong odor that pierced the nose. And oddly enough, the floor was covered with numerous tacks, so we tried our best not to step on them while we walked in. At that moment, we heard a strange, screaming-like noise coming from upstairs. We should have left the house at that moment. However, we couldn't resist our curiosity and slowly walked up the stairs. From one room on the second floor, we heard the sound of electricity crackling. Then we heard a man's voice from that room saying, "Don't eat it. Eat it." We were shocked and cautiously approached the room. When we looked inside, Tim screamed in horror. As we entered, we saw 3 people sitting on the floor with dog collars around their necks, and one man was training them with a stun gun. All of them stared at us in silence for a moment, and then they started screaming for help like crazy. The man who was training them panicked and started hitting them, telling them to shut up, but they screamed so loud that it seemed like their throats would burst. Curses involuntarily slipped from my mouth as I looked into their tear-filled eyes. At that moment, the man hitting them grabbed the stun gun and charged at us, and Tim and I ran for our lives. However, Tim was caught, and his screams echoed through the hallway, along with the sound of the stun gun. I ran out of the house and called the police, then went back inside. I walked to the room without making any noise, and the man was putting the dog collar on Tim's neck. I ran towards him in anger and kicked him with all my might. He rolled over and fell. He dropped the electric shocker, and I picked it up and threatened him while kicking him crazily. After a while, the police arrived and arrested him. When the police tried to untie the people tied up with dog collars, they were shocked. Their hands and feet were glued to the floor with instant adhesive. I realized that Tim's hands and feet were also stuck to the floor with adhesive. I locked eyes with sobbing Tim, and my legs turned to jelly. Eventually, the rescue team arrived and managed to rescue the people who were tied up. However, they had been beaten and fed only dog food for weeks, and their condition was serious. When the police asked the man why he did such a thing, he simply said he wanted to keep the humans as pets. He was eventually sent to prison. Fortunately, Tim was able to recover from his injuries with treatment, but the trauma stayed with him. We never brought up that story again after that day. This story has now come to an end, but I want to warn you all, if you ever feel like exploring an abandoned house, never, ever go there. No one can guarantee your safety.